Okay, so in the last video, I talked about how Ultra Heaven relates to post war Showa era Japan and reconciling with the trauma of its failed idealism in the 60s. Now let's move on to the 90s, focusing on Aum Shinrikyo. So the 90s were a shock to the previously rich Japan of the 80s. There was the economic collapse and stagnation, which worsened the job market. There was the Kobe earthquake, revealing the fragility of national infrastructure. And then there were the sarin gas attacks on the Tokyo subway by the doomsday cult Aum Shinrikyo, killing 13 people, injuring thousands. And that's what we're going to talk about. Founded in 1984 by Matsumoto Chizuo, who later changed his name to Shoko Asahara, Aum started off as a yoga group and grew into a new religion in 1989. The group believed in a pure utopian vision of Japan, combining a number of beliefs such as Buddhism, Hinduism, and Christianity, all of which appear in Ultra Heaven. Aum was a product of the capitalist 70s and 80s, where people lacked meaning and community despite the wealth that they have. Sociologist Miyadai Shinji described this as the endless everyday, where life's obstacles have been mostly eliminated by the consumption and wealth of society, and the individual is left to live a comfortable everyday life with no conflict or purpose. This is what drove the creation of Aum, in addition to the loss of idealism back in the 60s with the failed student movements and leftist political groups. Now, according to sociologist Osawa Masachi, the 70s and the 80s was the age of fiction, where people turned to fiction to fulfill their ideals, because they failed in reality. Activism failed and life felt empty or meaningless in capitalism. That's why you get anime like Nausicaa, where Miyazaki displayed his ideal environmentalist story, or Akira, where the post-war anxiety and the younger generation makes way for a new universe of possibilities. That's why Tetsuo starts a new universe with Akira. Spoilers, I guess. Now, Aum themselves were heavily influenced by anime and manga in the age of fiction, featuring Nausicaa in their magazine, singing songs from Space Battleship Yamato, and of course, they also made their own anime and manga. But for Aum, fiction wasn't just something to watch or experience to, escape reality. It was their reality because, it's a religion. Aum offered an escape from the materialistic capitalist society through fiction, through their beliefs, which was very obsessed with the idea of purity and impurity, that the world was evil and they were the good guys. But they didn't just want to escape society, escape the fiction in their own little community. They wanted to save society with their doctrine. They wanted to bring their fictional ideals into reality. But there's a problem. Reality and ideals are incompatible. There must be a compromise. And Aum didn't want to do that. Because if they did, there would be dissonance within their beliefs, right? It wouldn't be pure. So Aum dived completely into fiction, giving up their material possessions and connections to normal society, like friends and family, in the pursuit of enlightenment. They can no longer tell the difference between fiction and reality. And when reality doesn't follow their beliefs, they turn to violence to force that ideal to come true. Just like any other cult. A lot of violent rituals, extortion, and murders, internally within the cult and externally. The final step into this fictional reality happened when Aum ran for office in 1990. This was their final peaceful attempt to bring their ideals into reality by establishing a political party. But they completely failed. They were rejected by normal society because people thought they were crazy. They were wearing masks of Asahara. It wasn't good. This was the turning point where, instead of wanting to save society, Aum wanted to destroy the society that rejected them. They started to believe in a final war to save the world, Saishu Senso, which eventually led to the sarin gas attacks, marking the end of the fictional age. After the attacks, a lot of commentators described Aum as being unable to distinguish between fiction and reality, blaming anime, manga, religion, and spirituality. There was a clear stigma towards these things, especially religion and spirituality, for obvious reasons, right? It's a cult. That's where Ultra Heaven comes in, with the meditation center representing Aum. So we start off in Volume 2 when they first appear in a TV show, spreading the word about the cult and their beliefs, showing off their spoon bending powers. This is exactly the same thing as what Aum did. They showed up on TV shows to advertise themselves, but the psychic powers weren't real, of course. But yeah, Kabu and Sally are watching, and Sally pretty much outlines the manga's stance on the Aum incident using the meditation center as an allegory. First, she acknowledges that most people join the cult in a mass hysteria, wanting to acquire spiritual powers following the cult's doctrine without really understanding it. They just end up worshipping a guy. That's why Sally mentions, for the most part, they just end up giving their money to the center. Second, Sally says that she was pissed when all those people flocked around the center. She was mad that her belief and practice in spirituality became distorted, diluted, commercialized, and stigmatized. I think this mirrors Koike's feelings towards Aum, because everything that he stood for was blamed for Aum's insanity. From his early works in the 80s, like in Heaven's Door, Koike obviously loves, New Age spirituality, religions like Hinduism and Buddhism, world mythology, the occult, philosophy, and other stuff, right? His works were even featured on spiritual themed magazines like Agama. It was Asteroid, if you're interested. But because of Aum, anything that looks spiritual or religious is seen badly. People think this is what made Aum crazy. Same thing with anime and manga, right? Koike is, of course, a mangaka, and now it also has a bad rap because of Aum. Then third, Sally talks about how people in the cult are so deep into their own beliefs that they can't see the border between dreams and reality anymore. This reflects Aum's condition of being completely immersed within their beliefs that anything was justified in the name of their doctrine, like mass murder. Again, this is what journalists and scholars were saying about Aum, unable to distinguish between fiction and reality. As Sally says, if he had spoken, then he would have been exposed, because everyone would have seen that he was tripping. But Sally isn't completely negative, because fourth, she mentions that skills prevail, that the gifted advance real quick to a higher state, while offering Kabu help to explore his mind, using the same tool as those crazy cult members, the amplifier. And this is the main point Ultra Heaven is trying to make. It's trying to tell us to take a second look into the religious or spiritual beliefs that Aum took from, like Buddhism or Hinduism, right? That they can be valuable for exploring the mind, purpose, and coming to terms with your trauma, like we talked about in the last video. That was only possible using the help of amplifiers and drugs in Volume 1. But it also acknowledges the nature of these cults, that they can and will be corrupted by human desires. And that's really it. The manga tells you that, yeah, it led to some really bad things, but spirituality, religion, anime, manga, and psychedelic drugs can also bring you good. And one thing I forgot to mention, Aum famously used drugs in their rituals, specifically LSD. And we all know that Koike loves LSD and, other psychedelic stuff. So that's another thing about Koike that Aum gave a bad reputation to. It's almost like a personal attack on his identity, and he's out here defending himself with his manga. At least that's what I think. I don't know if he actually feels this way. Also, drugs were already seen badly in Japan. And I think all made it worse. But I don't know. I don't have a source for the social impact of Aum's drug usage. I'm just speculating. Anyway, back to Ultra Heaven. Yeah, the point is to bring up the good things about spirituality and whatnot, while also acknowledging the bad things that happened with Aum. And the 4 points are basically it, and throughout the volumes, we just see a repetition of it. In Volume 2, Kabu rediscovering and acknowledging his trauma of his mother shows the good side of spirituality, while the TV scene foreshadows the bad things in Volume 3. In the first half of Volume 3, we get to see human desire ruining things, starting off in the first floor where people are using spirituality to indulge in their desires, commercializing it in a game center, as Sally mentions. Then in the Drome, you get to see the fight between Sally and the veterans. Sally's too self indulgent, partying all the time, while the veterans are angry and hateful. Then we get the masters who are prideful and, look down on people. Basically, human desire corrupts everything, just like the real life cults who distort good beliefs like Buddhism. Then, of course, we get Kabu, who doesn't have any desire, which is why he's the perfect guy to show the good side of spirituality. Exploring Kabu's self, reconciling with his trauma, the 4 ideas of heaven, and coming close to enlightenment at the end of Volume 3. Thus, by experiencing Kabu's journey in these 3 volumes where he rediscovers himself and finds purpose in life, using a combo of spirituality, religion, drugs, anime, and manga, Ultra Heaven destigmatizes all of these things that were stigmatized by the Aum Shinrikyo incident. And again, I think Koike is doing this because all those things are a big part of his identity. And of course, these things can actually be good, right? And that's pretty much it. Because the point about Aum Shinrikyo and spirituality is supposed to be part of the bigger Japanese national trauma allegory that Ultra Heaven is making that I talked about in the last video. It's the main trauma of the 90s that the manga talks about. So that's why the video is short. Anyway, thanks for watching. If you have any thoughts, leave them in the comments. I think this might be my last full-blown analysis video on Ultra Heaven. So yeah, it's been great. I don't know, I might make another one, but I don't know if it's going to be this interesting. But yeah, thanks guys, and goodbye.